Vulkan is here. The graphics API we've been waiting for so long has arrived in Star Citizen. Should you make the switch from DX11 in 3.23? We've got numbers with a 7800 XUD and a 4080 at 1080p, 1440p and 4K. We've done some testing on my minimum spec system as well, and I've even got some results from a gaming laptop. What I'm about to show you with the numbers, there are some real signs of promise here, but there are a couple of pretty big buts. We've got to remember that this is not a polished version of Vulkan. It's a first go, a tier 0, maybe, if you like CIG's language. Multi-threaded rendering is not enabled with this version of the game. Ali Brown, the graphics whiz, has said here that that will come in a future release. And I know a lot of people have been hoping that Vulkan will just fix all the performance issues with the game. That was never going to happen, but when I tested this on the PTU, there were promising signs. There's also been a great Reddit thread from Captain Tombstone, wonderful member of our Discord. Come and join and get lots of amazing advice from people over there. He put up a great thread looking at this, and again, there were really promising signs of Vulkan. And in the numbers I'm going to show you, as I said, there are promising signs, but there are a couple of problems. Let's start off with my main system, 7800 X3D and 4080. We've done, as I love to do, my testing at Lawville, all the way running through the city over and over and over again. This testing took me so long. It's taken me days. It's quite slow to get into the game sometimes, but we're here now. If you appreciate this sort of testing, what's the thing people say? You can like and subscribe, all that malarkey. But at Lawville, we've done 10 runs of each. First of all, at 1080p, you'll see that performance on the average FPS side of things is basically the same, but the 1% percentile FPS is slightly better with Vulkan, and keep an eye on that as we go through this. A better way potentially to show this is through frame time. So this graph, a bit complicated, but if you notice the number of spikes that basically go above the 50 millisecond sort of range is much higher on the DX11 graph we've got here compared to the Vulkan one. So there's a sense where things are smoother with Vulkan. It seems as though whatever they've done so far, with this early first version of Vulkan, there's less craziness in terms of frame times, which is a very good sign for the future. For my 1440p friends, there's always somebody who complains when I don't do a test of 1440p, but I've got one this week. We've got the same sorts of results. For some reason, these results are slightly higher. No real good reason for that. Maybe that's just servers being servers. But again, you'll see that the Vulkan 1% percentile FPS is again higher than DX11. At 4K, well, a bit of a bizarre result here. We're now actually on the GPU slightly going around Lawville. The other results were completely CPU bound, but at 4K, the 4080 does dip into being GPU bound. And for some reason, DX11's average FPS has now pulled ahead a bit. I don't know, again, if we want to read too much into that. But again, the thing that we maybe can read into is that even though the average is higher with DX11, the 1% percentile FPS is still higher with Vulkan. So again, a good sign for frame pacing, stutteriness, that sort of thing. Now we'll switch to my minimum spec system, doing the same thing in Lawville, 10 runs of each. And you'll see here that DX11 is marginally ahead from average FPS point of view, but nothing noticeable really. And again, the 1% percentile FPS, again, smoother with Vulkan. So this is not just on higher end systems. There seems to be a bump in smoothness, at least with lower end systems also. Now for a result that slightly bucks the trend here, but I put on my earphones, I blocked out the noise and fired up the gaming laptop. This has got a Ryzen 5 7640HS and a 4050. It is actually still CPU bound, even though the 4050 is not particularly high-end GPU on a laptop. The CPU is still the bottleneck, completely going around Lawville. But you'll see here, Vulkan, for some reason, seems to be a bit further ahead. Now, I could speculate on why. We could come up with some crazy theories, architecture stuff, but who knows? Not really particularly interesting why that would be at this point. But again, first percentile FPS, again, better than with DX11. So it's all looking pretty good so far for Vulkan. So should you just turn it on? Well, unfortunately, the answer is probably no. Let me show you a couple of things that are bugs, really, rather than anything else. So this isn't the long-term future of Vulkan, but there are some reasons why in this version of the patch, you probably shouldn't turn it on. First of all, there's been a fair amount of reporting from people saying there might be a memory leak with Vulkan, and I have seen some potential evidence of that. If you look here at this chart, if you look down where it says GPU VRAM usage, on the left, this is the average of the 10 runs on my main system, 7800X3D 4080 at 4K, and you'll see an average of 11.54 gigabytes usage. But on the right hand side, you'll see a graph that shows a much higher VRAM usage. Now, what this is that when I first started testing at 4K, I did 5 runs and I kept an eye on the VRAM, and it kept going up and up and up after each run that I did. And so this is after 5 runs, this is the 5th run, and you'll see that the VRAM has gone up nearly 3 gigabytes. And so it does seem that there might be a potential VRAM problem, a memory leak. I then obviously changed the testing I did, and I basically exited out the game each time that I did a run for the rest of the Vulkan testing, just so that we didn't have this issue messing around with performance. But effectively, I think this bug on its own really means that in the current 3.23 version, you probably shouldn't have Vulkan on. Another issue that I came across with Vulkan was that whenever I set my resolution down to 1440p or 1080p to test, for some reason it just didn't work. It would go back up to 4K, and so I ended up having to test windowed so that I could actually test at the proper resolution. So there seems to be some funniness going on if you're not playing at the resolution of your monitor, the native resolution of the monitor. The VRAM issue on its own is basically enough for me to recommend anybody not to turn on Vulkan in 3.23. Now, the interesting thing is that as soon as 3.23 went live, we got a 3.23.1 patch into the PTU, obviously getting everything ready for Invictus. And in that patch, I believe there is a fix for this issue, and they've been putting in more and more fixes for Vulkan and on bits and bobs. So potentially from next week, from when Invictus comes out, these issues will have been ironed out. But if you're wanting to play the game, Star Citizen, the obvious choice here is just to leave it on DX11 and let CRG cook, as people will say. Let them work these issues out, let them fix up the problems over the next few months, over the next few releases, and wait until Vulkan is actually ready to go. It is not finished. Let's say that again. It's not finished. But if you like fiddling around, testing things out, obviously give Vulkan a go. You may see smoother frames like I'm seeing here. It kind of seems quite consistent across the different systems I checked, but prepare for bugs and things to not work and for elements to break and things like that to happen. So for the average person playing Star Citizen, I would stick with DX11. We should though congratulate CRG for finally getting Vulkan in our hands. It's taken ages. We've been waiting for this for years. And so I just want to say thank you to all the people who've worked on this. And it is very exciting to see that the future is very promising with Vulkan.